Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Wild, in which the Sharks managed to win 4-0, their third shutout of the season, and their third shutout by a score of 4-0, so that's definitely an interesting coincidence. The Sharks this game started off rather slow in the first period. I don't think they actually got one decent chance in that period. They were just mostly throwing shots on net from the point, very low percentage plays, and they really couldn't seem to find anything against a strong Wild defense. And meanwhile, the Wild, while they couldn't really get much offensive zone time sustained against the Sharks in that period, they did manage to jump on them a bit on the rush, got a couple of 2-on-1s. I believe Eric Staal hit a post in this period. However, the Sharks found themselves luckily tied 0-0 going into the second period. And while the second period started quite well for the Wild, those first few minutes they got another couple decent chances. The Sharks managed to storm back after that. They got 2 goals in quick succession from Logan Couture off of a brilliant pass from Łukasz Radil, as well as from Joe Pavelski, as I said, about 26 seconds later, and the Sharks had a 2-goal lead. They got a power play near the end of the second period, which interestingly enough was the only power play assessed to a team in this entire game, as the Wild ended up with 0 on the night. And the Sharks found themselves in a similar position they were in against the Wild in their first meeting of the season. Of course, for anyone who remembers that, the Sharks had a 3-1 lead at the end of the second period, and the Wild managed to get 2 goals quickly in the third period to tie that game. And while the Sharks did manage to then score in regulation from Barclay Goodrow to win it 4-3, the Sharks definitely didn't want to make the same mistake twice, and that they did not. And not only did they not give up the 2 goals early, they scored one of their own, Logan Couture's second of the game, put themselves up 3-0, and played some pretty solid defense for the rest of the third, and with Radil's empty net goal, managed to take it 4-0. The first thing to talk about is, of course, Martin Jones, his first shutout of the season as he continues his mini resurgence on the season so far. It was a bit of a worry after he had a very tough outing against the Chicago Blackhawks. Not only was he pulled, but it wasn't just because he let in 3 quick goals, but the 3 quick goals were not very good goals to have actually let in. Aaron Dell stepped in and played very, very well, and so it was maybe a bit of a question of whether or not Jones would actually get the start here against the Minnesota Wild, but DeBoer goes with his starter again, and Jones shows him why he should have some faith in him. He has a very nice game. He gets a bit lucky, a couple of posts hit by the Wild, a couple of empty net opportunities for the Wild that they end up missing or shooting wide or getting blocked by Sharks players. But as the saying goes, you have to be lucky to be good, or good to be lucky. And that's exactly how it went for Jones tonight. And it's been how Jones has been able to perform in the past few games besides that Chicago Blackhawks one. Next is Logan Couture, and I haven't really talked too much about Logan Couture. I think this is maybe even the first time I've had him written up on this board. He's mostly a player who does everything in all situations. He's not the most flashy kind of player. A lot of his goals, they're not dirty goals, but they're mostly just snipes and types of goals that you rarely do talk about unless they're like very, very nice. And he's not really someone that I've been mentioning too much. I've obviously mentioned Hertl and Meyer, his line mates, but Couture has somewhat silently even taken the points lead on the Sharks, 36 points now on the season. He has recently signed an extension for 8 years, $8 million. He's proving his worth in that regard because Couture, he doesn't just play at even strength, he doesn't just rack up points, but he plays on the power play and he does that well. He plays on the penalty kill and he does that very well, as the Sharks definitely rely heavily on Logan Couture when it comes to killing very key penalties, and it's one of the reasons why the Sharks have one of the best penalty kills in the entire NHL. And he sort of is similar to players like Andrei Kopitar, Patrice Bergeron, who are able to play in all these situations, who are very, very key for their teams. And Logan Couture, a lot of people are, talk about it, theorize that he could be next in line for the captaincy once Joe Pavelski either leaves the team in free agency or retires or anything like that. And it definitely seems like that should be the case down the line. Next is Radil, and he had another solid game for the fourth line. The fourth line in general was quite solid in this game. He gets an empty netter, which is his second of his career after he scored that game-winning goal, first in his career just a few games ago against the Arizona Coyotes. But what was most impressive about Radil was his nice little assist on the Logan Couture play, very Joe Thornton-esque type of assist. The spinning around, no-look backhand pass to Logan Couture right in front of the net off the bench. He gets that goal, and so it was a very nice pass from Radil. I don't know if he's actually termed as a rookie because he's a bit older than the cutoff is, but it's still technically his first NHL season, so I will call him a rookie. And he's been doing a good job here for this fourth line. He's definitely energized it, and it seems as though, as I've been saying for the past couple of games, that fourth line continues to impress and will continue to be the fourth line, at least for the next few games. And every good game that passes, they buy themselves more, lenience if they were to have, let's say, somewhat of a worse game moving forward. Next is Radim Simek, and he was his usual solid self defensively. There was one sort of off shift in the third period, and late in the third period where it wasn't very good. But Simek in general has looked very good all season. All of the games he's played this season, he looked very good again tonight. Got a couple of assists even, which was a nice little bonus for him. He actually had a very nice play in the third period where he managed to get himself free from the Wild's suffocating defense, found themselves with some open ice. While he didn't handle the pass that great, and so he couldn't get too much of a great shot off on Devan Dubnyk, who managed to challenge him and make the save. It was still some nice offensive awareness from Simek, something we haven't seen too much from him, which isn't to say a bad thing when you're playing with Brent Burns, but it's always nice to be more of a well-rounded defenseman, and Simek continues to impress. And as I said with the fourth line, who continue to build leniency if they were to have a subpar game, Simek also now has that, as he's just been so solid for the few games that he has played this season. And if it wasn't already the case, I'm pretty sure he has now cemented himself as the sixth defenseman on this team, and maybe even higher than the sixth if you want to try and place him above Brendan Dillon, but that's definitely speaking a bit too much at this point. Finally, the next person who I'd like to talk about, the final person I'd like to talk about, is Erik Karlsson. I talked about Erik Karlsson a lot earlier on this season when he wasn't playing too well, and it seems as though I've backed off a bit because now he's playing very, very well, but I will mention him tonight. He had a beautiful assist on Logan Couture's third goal, and he's just been very, very good for the past few games in general. A lot of people earlier on in the season were saying that maybe that Erik Karlsson trade wasn't worth it. The Sharks gave up a lot, and with how the Sharks had been performing earlier on, people started to believe Erik Karlsson was not going to want to re-sign with the Sharks, and it seemed as though that could have been the case, especially up until that Ottawa Senators game where they got completely thrashed by a weak Senators squad, the team that the Karlsson had just come from, had just been traded from. And so a lot of people were saying maybe he'd just go to Tampa, maybe he'd go to Vegas, maybe he'd go back to Ottawa. But now it seems, earlier on in the season I'd said Erik Karlsson had arrived, but now it seems as though he's definitely arrived. He's playing some very, very good hockey, definitely the best hockey of his short San Jose Sharks career. And maybe with how the season is going, maybe Erik Karlsson actually does consider, maybe the Sharks do want him to come back onto the team, because he's definitely playing like the defenseman that he was advertised to be coming into this season. And I believe there was a quote before this game where he said something like his game was not at the top level that it can be. If his game that I saw tonight is not actually his top level, I'll definitely be very interested to see what exactly is that top level, because he looked very on point tonight, and it's not just offensively with that beautiful pass to Couture, but it's also been very solid for him defensively. And the only bad news with Erik Karlsson isn't real bad news. It's sort of like when I say about Timo Meier, the bad news of him doing very well is that Erik Karlsson's cap hit, or projected cap hit, that had begun to maybe trickle a bit down as he started the season rather slow, has now shot back up to expected numbers coming into the season around the 11 million mark that Drew Doughty himself makes for the Los Angeles Kings as the highest paid defenseman. So it'll be tough for the Sharks to fit Karlsson in, but if they were going to pull something off with John Tavares this past offseason, that's an even higher cap hit of a contract, I'm sure that Doug Wilson can work it out, at least money-wise. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action looking for their sixth win in a row against the Winnipeg Jets on Thursday. Definitely the toughest competition that they'll have played. The first 5 games I believe they played against, it was the Devils, the Stars, the Blackhawks, the Coyotes, and now the Wild. 5 okay teams ranging in there. The Stars are okay, the Wild are okay, but I don't think any of those 5 teams actually find themselves in a playoff spot right now. So the real test here comes against these Winnipeg Jets, one of, if not the top team in the Western Conference. They've been getting some fantastic scoring from players like Scheifele, Laine, Wheeler. And so if Jones thought he had a decently tough night tonight against the Wild and he was able to shut them out, he's definitely going to be in for an even tougher night against this offensively gifted squad. But this was a very key points tonight against the Wild because they get the 2 points tonight while the Ducks lost tonight. The Golden Knights lost yesterday, so they're beginning to get some separation. As long as they can keep stringing these wins together, they'll begin to secure their spot in the playoffs for the Pacific Division. Now, of course, it's quite early in the season, still not to the halfway mark, but still, the points now mid-December count just as much as the points in early April. Class dismissed.